Hey guys, welcome to the Sugrim podcast, where we take a deep dive under the surface of reality. I had a fantastic talk with Leah Geoghegan about the power of immunity and how to line ourselves up so we can face external pathogens this winter. I hope you enjoy the show. We train to have mastery of our own mind. With me today is Leah Geoghegan. Leah is a nurse practitioner. She focuses on functional medicine. She has worked at NYU Langone and has a lot of experience in the ER. And you are dissatisfied with the state of health and our traditional approaches of fixing people and getting them back out there. You're looking more at the root cause of disease and lifestyle. So we're going to talk about the ways to optimize the body for immunity to face pathogens, particularly COVID-19, and strategies for keeping a good attitude during this crazy time. Leah, welcome to the program.
Hi, Jai. Thanks so much for having me.
All right, so how's your mindset? Speaking of mindset, given that you're in a new home, you've had a lot of change, and you are soaring in your work. So what's your overall state as we kick this off?
Yeah, thanks so much for asking. Lots of transitions, especially with fall too, but mostly positive ones, luckily. So happy to be here with you and to share some of those things and share some of my knowledge as well.
Fantastic. Let's jump right into it. Where do you start with coaching a client? How do you put them in a program? How do you find out what they're inclined to do? What would build a healthy habit? What's the beginning point with making someone stronger and healthier?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as Jai mentioned, I'm a nurse practitioner and I have my own private practice in New York. It's called Emergence Health. And I offer both primary care and functional medicine services to patients. And it's via telehealth and home care. So I don't have a centralized office. I come to you and I take care of you where you feel most comfortable. Um, and so much about health is understanding somebody's story. I really believe that the body actually knows what is wrong or what is out of balance, and it takes a skilled provider to truly listen and then implement and act upon the areas that are off. And that requires a lot of time that our conventional model of care just doesn't allow providers. Most of those visits are quick in and out. You're there, you get a quick assessment, you get a prescription, and you leave within 15 minutes. Where with my approach, I do a free consult at first with my clients. And I really want to just make sure that our personalities drive together and that they understand my approach and they're open to my philosophy of care. And from there, we schedule a first appointment, which is an hour long, to really allow that time for them to speak their truth and for me to really just listen. And we go all the way back from when they were born to where they are today, because with a trained eye, even just little things that happened in your life can accumulate over time and lead to a state of disease, where I oftentimes find people. So the details, my practice is all in the details.
Yeah, I hear you trying to really connect with the person and the story that made them into who they are, because a lot of it is, I feel like the data on overall health is out there, and data on cigarettes and what's good for you, what's bad for you, what to avoid has come to the surface. And there's a lot of studies that we can look at that can guide us, but really making a connection to the deeper part of someone and knowing that you have their back as someone with a medical background, that emotional connection, I feel like, can bring it to another level, which is so missing in this world.
You're absolutely right. And we actually even know that that provider patient relationship helps to enhance immunity, which is what we're talking about today. Just being heard by a provider and being listened to and feeling like somebody's empathizing with how you're feeling helps to sensitize the natural killer cells in your body, which are part of your immune system that helps to fight off viruses and bacteria.
Are you, when you're fixing the mindset and connecting with the person initially, um, are you talking about long-term benefits, short-term benefits? How do you get them to make the commitment to the path you're laying out? Because it's not just take this drug. I was hearing Zach Bush talk yesterday about, he got out of med school and they're like, oh, here's 2,000 diseases, here's 2,000 drugs, get to work. How do you look a little deeper than that with mindset?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So a lot of the initial work is educating people on this new lens of looking at their health. Because right now, I mean, we live in a world where sick care is the standard. You only receive health care when you're feeling sick. It's not really focused around prevention and keeping the body healthy. So it requires educating the patient and then also helping them switch their mindset to be more proactive. Because it really is the simple things that surround us in our day to day lives, things like sleep, stress, relationships, food, our environment, that all over time impact what's going on in the inside of our body. So bringing that awareness to them. And then honestly, as much as I try, which I really do try and encourage my patients and offer them support, I allow 24/7 me if they have questions or if something comes up. Um, but a lot of the hard work is within them. You can always inspire it, but it needs to come from within them.
Mhm.
And explain that concept of self-efficacy to patients, that I can tell you and inform you of all of these great benefits to your health, but it really is up to you in order to flip that switch and to actually implement it in your life. And I'll be there to support you, but that's your decision on when you do that.
Fantastic. What is the next stage of working with a client once that emotional connection to the path is made, that devotion?
Yeah, absolutely. So, in that initial assessment, I get a lot of information on someone. And from there, I try and restructure their history in a way that's framed around their health concerns so that they understand how their old, um, either patterns of habits or different things that they were exposed to could influence their health. I do a very comprehensive diagnostic testing panel, whether that's stool, hormone tests, vitamin, minerals. I do some standard tests as well, like cholesterol panels and things like that. And then we follow up for another hour-long visit where we review all of those tests, what they actually mean in the body. Even if they're quote unquote normal, I understand why that's important. Um, or I explain why that's important, excuse me. And then from there, we actually develop a personalized plan, which I think we're going to talk about a lot today as well, because everything is truly personalized as it should be with people, because no two people are created the same.
Right. So prevention is your whole approach here. Your whole plan is to prevent and to strengthen yourself to face what's out there. Let's take a moment and get to the elephant in the room. It's not really an elephant, it's the obvious one. Tell us what you've learned before we delve deeper into your approach about the virus we're also concerned about and its strength and the new data that I'm just getting a handle on and figuring out that you're explaining to me. Go ahead and share what we have learned in almost feels like crazy a year of dealing with coronavirus. Where are we
Yeah.
today, and what can we look at down the line and facing this?
Yeah, absolutely. So wow, it's almost been a year. I mean, coronavirus first popped up in China in November of 2019, and here we are today. We do have a lot of cases right now in the United States. We had over 1 million new cases of COVID that were confirmed last week in the US, which is more than any other country has ever reported during the pandemic. But that being said, even though the cases are so high right now, um, lower. And I think I can attribute a lot of that to how much we've learned about the virus over the past couple of months. So, COVID is a virus that binds to the ACE2 receptors in our body, and it's mostly in droplets in the air that we then inhale. And the virus actually binds to those receptors, which are found on different organs of our body, primarily the lungs, the heart, the liver, the kidneys. And what it does is it blocks a pathway that would help with decreasing inflammation. So it increases inflammation, specifically in small vessels of the body. So that's why we can see issues with circulation with some people, sometimes blood clots. We see people with high temperatures, shortness of breath, scarring of the lungs can happen over time. And what you and I were speaking about, Jai, that's fairly new that we're learning about is long COVID, which is when people have had COVID, tested negative, and now have more chronic symptoms of immune system inflammation. Not really from the virus, but from how the virus affected their immune system and altered it in a
I want to
way
back
that.
up for a second. You said tested negative, or do you mean test positive and then healed
So
from it?
So they've tested positive, but now they test negative. It's once the virus has left the body that they'll get this
Oh,
long
so you're
COVID
looking at
syndrome.
effects after you've had coronavirus.
Exactly. So if they would get a swab, they would be negative, but they have these immune system flares that look like COVID, but they're not.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not gone necessarily when it's gone, we're seeing.
Yeah, I mean, it can leave some severe permanent damage. Hopefully not permanent. I mean, we're still working on exploring long COVID more and understanding why the immune system's reacting that way in ways that we can help control it again. But we do know that it can cause things like scarring in the lungs, um, and things like chronic fatigue long term.
Okay, so let's get back to on track with uh, strengthening our immune system to do the best job to face it. Uh,
Yes.
where do we go next? You know, you have your mindset and you're going into lifestyle. Where do you work with the person next?
Yeah, totally. So let's talk about nutrition next,
Mhm.
because food really is medicine. We know that what we put in our body is important for how our body functions. There's nothing particularly special about a COVID diet. It should be a diet that we honestly all should follow more regularly anyway. It's staying away from processed foods. The way I like to explain this to patients is look at a food label, and if there's anything on there that you don't know how to pronounce, it's probably something you shouldn't be eating. Better yet, it probably shouldn't be anything that comes in a box. Things like fresh fruits and veggies, grass fed meats, or free range chicken, things like that. Our bodies know how to break down and use for energy and for nutrients very well. And avoiding things like processed sugars too, because we know that COVID affects our inflammation sources in our body, and sugar is a highly inflammatory component that we unfortunately eat too much of in the U.S.
And you're personalizing the diet based on the data you gathered on the first session, and each time you get to know them a little better, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I really try and meet patients where they're at. I want to make sure that the diets that I'm recommending to them are things that they enjoy eating or they are willing to explore. It's always easier to um, encourage somebody to eat something that they enjoy that's good for them versus something that they don't really like. And then also their nutrient levels too. B vitamins, vitamin C, all of those things that help to show energy and immune system functioning in the body, because we know those are the building blocks on how our bodies maintain immunity. If those are low, then I'll prescribe different foods as medicine to help increase those levels naturally.
Let's dive in really quick to the three main supplements you recommend to people during the winter and with less sunlight and for COVID. What are the three supplements as we're talking about food intake? Can you tell me what you would recommend we get?
Yeah, that's a great idea, Jai. So I can give the supplements and then I can also give some foods that those vitamins are also present in if you want to supplement that way. So the first one is vitamin D. It's the one that has the most research on it, and showing that it has protective effects against COVID. They did studies on patients in the ICU, and the ones that were more sick had lower levels of vitamin D than the ones that were not. And we mostly get vitamin D from the sun, which is also a way to help get rid of COVID. It actually does kill COVID, sunlight. But since we're getting into the winter and we're not going to be having as much exposure to sun, supplementing is a good idea. I recommend people to start with 5,000 IUs of vitamin D, and you take it with food because it's a fat soluble vitamin. And some good sources of vitamin D, if you wanted to try and get it in your diet, there aren't a ton, but cod liver oil is a really good one, or like krill oil has a good amount of vitamin D, and also fortified like drinks like milk.
Mhm. And C.
Yes, vitamin C is also super important. So, vitamin C is a powerful antioxidant in our body. It helps to become antiviral, antibacterial, getting rid of those toxins we're exposed to. I recommend taking anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 milligrams of vitamin C a day. It doesn't need to be with food, it can be just with some water. And one thing to watch out for with vitamin C, if you are supplementing at high doses, is that it can aggravate kidney stones. So if you have a history of kidney stones, just be careful with taking it.
And
And the last one that we want to chat about. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention vitamin C. Citrus fruits are a big source, and then also green leafy vegetables are great sources of vitamin C, and sweet potatoes. And then the last supplement is zinc, which has probably gotten a lot of traffic in the news because zinc actually stops replication of the COVID virus inside of the cell. But it needs to be brought into the inside of the cell. So I do recommend people, if they're supplementing with zinc, that they're eating a lot of broccoli sprouts because they're rich in quercetin, which is needed to pull that zinc into the cell to do its job. And zinc you should supplement at around 20 to 40 milligrams a day, and that can be with food.
great. So mindset, nutrition. Where are we going next?
Let's go for exercise for
Super.
sure.
My favorite.
Exercise. So important for cellular health. It actually helps clean out cells that have been damaged or that aren't working as properly. It helps to increase your energy levels. It helps improve circulation and boost immunity. Because it's actually a stressor on the body, exercise, but a positive one that helps to just upregulate the way that the body works.
So which forms of exercise do you recommend and how do you create a program for someone?
Yeah, good question. So it's very similar to food in the sense that no two people are the same and neither will their exercise regimens. I know I'm speaking to a pro with that as well. But I do recommend at least 30 minutes 3 times a week of cardio exercise. So things getting your heart rate up, like cycling, running, swimming is also very good, or high intensity interval training. So really rapid, high heart rate activities, but not for as long, can be really beneficial. But then, coupled with that, you also need strength. You need to be able to put pressure on those bones and increase muscle density. So, doing something that is strength related, whether that's weight training, Pilates, calisthenics, yoga can even be considered one, especially with the added bonus of stretching,
Mhm.
provides a really nice balance to that cardio to really give a total body workout.
What's your move? What do you do?
Oh, good question. So during quarantine, I've actually been doing exercise with two of my friends 3 times a week as accountability since I'm not able to go to my gym. So we wake up at 7:30 on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and we typically do some type of high interval intensity workouts, like mix of jumping jacks, mountain climbers, a different workout routine together. Sometimes we add in some weights too, or Pilates. And I also really love just walking. I just moved into a state park, so I have a lot of nature around me, which is healing in itself, but especially with walking too.
Yeah, that's reminding me of how humans are adapting to this scene to meet that mental stabilizing effect that connection gives us. I find that like it's been a pain in the neck in some ways, but in some ways it's opened up chances to speak and have conversations, like getting used to being in digital conversations and drawing something interesting from it, even though you're not proximal to the person. Like, there are people I wouldn't have a chance to talk to in person that are open now to having these conversations, and that's rewarding, while at the same time not having to travel to meet them or fly to have these conversations. It's opening up new doors. And so the patients in the winter season, when you're not seeing people as much, you have to be creative, and you have to like get your girlfriends together like you're doing to do a workout and commit to it and be happy that you have that.
Absolutely. It's just all about mindset again, right? We can always focus on the negatives of this situation, because arguably there are and negatives, but there are also so many positive things that we can choose to focus on our day to day that helps keep us balanced and happy despite all of these changes.
Mhm.
And working on being grateful for the things that are working well, or the ability that we can connect with one another, on video chats like this, even though you and I haven't seen each other in a month or two, that we can get together and chat is something really special.
Yeah, it's brought more meaning to human contact, to rethink what it means to be in someone's energy and to exchange energy with someone, especially like I thought I was a little more paranoid at the beginning of this in terms of my quarantine was super tight. I only went out for groceries. I was trying to get a handle on the data as scientists were learning about it. And then I became a little more, definitely still very careful, but a little more flexible in my choices. Um, I went on a leisurely 1 week trip to the heart of it all in New York City and felt comfortable walking around. Um, you and I joked about my playing basketball one day. Like the first time I got asked to play, I said no, then I regretted it. And so, like a week later, I jumped into a game and took a little bit of a chance, even though it was a sunny day. Like there's calibrated risks, but it's the idea of mixing energy. And also, I've had a chance to like clean up energies that don't belong in my life or people that weren't really serving me to be around. And that specificity and that sort of taking out the trash and inventorying how you interact with people can be really good now.
That was so well said. I like the metaphor of taking out the trash, just putting all of those things into the trash bin that aren't serving you and using this as an opportunity to clean house in a way.
Yeah, totally. Cleaning house. So let's talk about this house that we live in, this temple. Uh, After personalized, specific exercise, where do you go next in focusing on immunity?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about detox next.
Okay.
Speaking of the body. So, our body right now, we live in a toxic environment. We have pollution in the air. We're exposed to chemicals in our food sometimes, in our cleaning products, and our personal care products that our bodies just do not know how to process and how to eliminate. So our immune system gets upregulated from these things, but they don't know how to actually tag them and remove them because they're foreign. So what happens is it ends up just building up in the body, and it loves to build up in the liver because the liver is really like our filter of our internal systems. So it helps to clean out any toxins that we're exposed to. So imagine if your cup is already full and you're trying to pour more water in it, there's no place for it to go and it starts to overflow. So if your body is already has a high body burden of toxins and then you're exposed to a virus like COVID, it's going to be harder for your system to really unify and activate itself in a way that's meaningful to get rid of the virus. Um, so, just in general, detox is important, but especially during this time with COVID. And I recommend mostly that people do some type of detox routine every 3 months and try and stay mindful of it in their day to day lives. Things as simple as having plants in your environment that help to eliminate toxins in the air can be really healing. To something that's a little bit more invasive, like taking a binder like charcoal or a high fiber to help pull out some toxins that could have been building up in the system. So, a combination of both of those things, in addition to exercise, diet, and even if you want to, something like a sauna can be really helpful as well. Um, Getting hot and actually sweating out some of those toxins are really great for detox.
Mhm. I know you've practiced a little fasting yourself. I do a water fast once a quarter. And can you tell us a little bit about your experience with intermittent fasting and how, when the body turns on itself, how that heals disease and how a cell can fix itself or kill itself from reducing your intake for short periods of time or with the intermittent fasting?
Yeah, sure. So, if anybody's interested in learning more about intermittent fasting, I've been following a lot of research from a researcher named Walter, and he's based out of University of
Can
Southern
you say his name
California.
again? The internet
Sure,
froze there for a second.
it's Walter Longo,
Okay.
Valter. Volta. So he has been studying longevity diets, intermittent fasting, ways to help increase our cellular health. And what he's found is that if you intermittent fast, or if you do like you do, like a hardcore water fast where you're not eating intermittently, what happens over time if you don't eat for anywhere from 48 to 72 hours, our body goes through a process called autophagy where it assesses the cells and how they're functioning in your system. And if there are any glitches or things aren't working as well as they should, the body actually initiates a programmed cell death and gets rid of those defunct cells. So it actually is cleansing and detoxing from the inside out. And that's part of the reason why the studies have shown that intermittent fasting helps with controlling chronic disease like cholesterol and blood sugar issues, as well as weight issues, and even anti cancer properties by getting rid of those cells.
Fantastic. With your work in schools and one on one testing, can you tell us a little bit about how people can approach? I know Thanksgiving's around the corner and it's not 14 days, but maybe if they're concerned about grandma's health and Christmas is rolling around, what can you do if you're going to have all the ages from the generations in one room for a celebration that's, pretty supposed to be pretty loving and full of contact? At least we're used to that.
You're so right. The concept of Thanksgiving is more important than ever this year. Being with family, having support, feeling grateful. But it can be a little bit of a logistic nightmare right now, thinking about being around relatives that might not have the same safety precautions as you, or somebody who's a little bit more vulnerable, like your grandparents. So there are like definitely ways to help mitigate that risk. There's never going to be like a situation where there's zero risk, but I've been trying to counsel my patients to know that communication between your relatives is imperative, making sure that everybody's on the same page and is really upfront with one another if anybody's had exposure or feeling sick. Um, Another thing for sure is to adhere to strict quarantine for at least 4 to 7 days before the holiday. The reason why I pick 4 to 7 days is after exposure to the virus, that is the average incubation period before the majority of people start to manifest symptoms. So if you're quarantining for those 4 to 7 days, if you start developing symptoms, that's usually the place where you'll see it, and you'll know to be more careful. And in addition to that, testing is still incredibly important. Um, I
Is the
recommend,
is the PCR test accurate? What's its accuracy?
yeah. So there are two big tests that are right now out on the market. We're not going to talk about antibody tests because they don't actually detect active virus. The two ones that detect active virus are antigen testing and then molecular testing, which are the PCR tests. So the PCR are the most sensitive and specific tests. They're the most accurate, meaning that if you have the virus, it's more likely to be detected and come back positive with a PCR test. Um, and so I actually offer the PCR tests with my practice. I do home care visits so that you don't have to go out and wait in line for them. I come right to you, I do the swab, and I follow up with the lab on your behalf so that you get the labs back as quick as possible. My typical turnaround is anywhere from 24 to 48 hours for test results. So if you're able to do that testing right before the holiday, in addition to the quarantining, you're setting your family up for the best success to have a happy and hopefully stress-free holiday.
In your circles, how are you guys having people over or meeting your social needs? Are you very strict? Are you taking calibrated risks like the time I played basketball? But I think that was an okay risk given how much sun was out. But it is a very thin line of staying sane. Someone I know said we have to watch out to not make life not worth living anymore, which is like a tough line, that um how far will you go and how far can you take it? But you know I have the friends that I quarantined for the first 4 months. They're still at that level of really, really, really wiping every single thing down that they buy from the store. um, they hardly ever have anyone over, and we have in this house been a little more open and keeping distance, and sometimes people will stay outside, but just finding that line. Like, it is a bit of a fatigue to be this long on it for such a stretch. People are getting fatigued with it, even though there's a risk.
Yeah,
How are
I
you handling
understand.
that?
Humans are social beings, right? We're meant to touch one another and share energy and be present physically with others. That this really is a strain. And I just keep thinking back to like 1918 with the Spanish flu, where they didn't have technology in order to see other people, and what that must have been like compared to us at least being able to see one another, even if it's not always in person. Um, Personally, I definitely am a little bit more lenient with my routines than I was at the beginning of quarantine,
Hmm.
but I'm still maintaining pretty conservative precautions. I'm not wiping down my groceries anymore, but we are socially distancing, and anybody that we see, we make sure that they quarantine for at least 7 days strictly and get a COVID test before we see them. And that's primarily because I am seeing people who are trusting me to go into their home and test them. And I want to make sure, even though I'm serially testing myself, that I am being as safe as I possibly can so that I'm not part of the problem when I'm actually offering a solution.
Fantastic. Is there anything you want to share with those pursuing health as we tie things together, and they're looking to dive deeper into self care at this time?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like now is really an opportune time to work on your health and well-being. There are some things that are challenging during this time, but it also is adding a lot of extra space in our schedules. I think you had mentioned earlier, Jai, that just not having to get on the subway to go and travel to a client just offers you some extra time that I encourage people to focus on themselves during this time. It's never a better time to really just reflect on your life and your body and that you can then work on. And it is always best to do it with another person, whether that's a friend to help with accountability or a provider to actually educate you and provide you with knowledge to really understand what's going on inside of your body. I think that now is a great time for all of us to capitalize on that potential.
Thank you, Leah. Thank you for this structured approach with the 5 arms of optimal immunity. As we wrap up, can you tell people where they can get in touch with you and what your handles are on media?
Yeah, sure. So my website is emergence.health, And there'll be a button on the top right hand corner to schedule a free consult if you're interested, so we can start that process and get to know one another. You can find me on Facebook at emergence.health or on Instagram at npleahgeoghegan. And my last name is spelled Geogheghan. I have to say, because it's Gaelic and it does not sound like that when you say it.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you for the inspiration, the insight, and a bit of structure step by step with what we need to focus on to take care of ourselves, Leah. I
Yeah,
appreciate
you're
your
so welcome.
time and the opportunity to speak with you in such an ordered way with health.
Thanks so much, Jai.
Thank you.